So liquidity as a service is not a new concept in decentralized finance. It's been along for a really long time. It's been around for a while, but not a lot of people have picked up on the terminology yet. There's also many different concepts in decentralized finance where you can earn income on your assets. You can do this specifically using liquidity pools and stuff along those lines. So there's yield farming, where you're essentially providing liquidity, you're staking it, but you're actually earning rewards as you're staking it. So you're pretty much like mining. This incentivizes you to provide more liquidity so you can keep on earning rewards. We also have liquidity mining, which is where you're providing liquidity, but you're getting the fees which the traders are paying. So the difference between yield farming and liquidity mining is basically yield farming can be built on top of liquidity mining, and it can also include liquidity mining, but it doesn't need to. So within yield farming, you don't need to have liquidity mining, but you can in this situation. Liquidity mining also has something that I like to call real yield. This is basically where there's a direct business model that's sustainable and you're not being paid out in any reward tokens, you're just strictly collecting fees. And the fees are just the fees that the traders themselves are paying. This is what I call real yield in liquidity mining. And in yield farming, you're receiving reward tokens, so that's not real yield. The cool thing is it could include real yield. So for example, if you start getting the fees here, and then you also start getting reward tokens, it works out really well. That would be yield farming still, and also liquidity mining, and would still be real yield. As you can see, there's a ton of different possibilities here, but I just want to focus on liquidity as a service today. Because liquidity as a service is when you're providing liquidity as a service. It's a pretty simple concept. This means liquidity as a service can include yield farming, and it can also include liquidity mining, because you're providing liquidity as a service. So if you want to break down the yield farming side of things, you typically have a decentralized exchange, and then people would provide liquidity into that exchange here, and then the traders would trade through this decentralized exchange. They'd take out one asset and put in another asset in. With yield farming, as opposed to just earning the fees that these traders are paying, where these fees are going all the way over to the liquidity provider, at the same time, the decentralized exchange is typically paying out reward tokens to the liquidity provider as well. So you also have fees coming in, and you also have the reward tokens coming in. This right here is yield farming, and you're providing two different services. Number one, you're providing a service to the decentralized exchange. You're increasing the liquidity in the decentralized exchange, and in return, you're getting paid in rewards. But number two, you're providing liquidity to the decentralized exchange, which is allowing the traders to trade. So this is providing a service to the traders as well. And this is basically how yield farming as a whole falls into liquidity as a service. And liquidity mining as a service is just going to be very similar to the model that we just took a look at. So here we have the decentralized exchange again. The trader is going to be trading from one cryptocurrency to the other cryptocurrency, and this is going to be done through the decentralized exchange, and the liquidity provider over here is going to be putting up both cryptocurrencies. And guess what? Since the liquidity provider is literally allowing these trades to happen, the crypto trader is paying the liquidity provider a small fee. So that fee would be considered real yield. So fee, real yield. But that fee is just the fee for their services, because ultimately if the liquidity provider didn't provide enough liquidity into the decentralized exchange, then the trader would not be able to trade successfully. So when I'm talking about liquidity as a service, I'm talking about both yield farming as well as liquidity mining, and this is just a much more broader term that we can use. We can go even further and say that under liquidity as a service, we have other models as well. You can also provide liquidity on lending and borrowing platforms, and you can even provide liquidity on other decentralized exchange platforms. The reason this falls under liquidity as a service is because on a lending and borrowing platform, you have the lending section and the borrowing section. The borrowers are literally just borrowing from the people that lend the assets, right? So first, let's just say there's $100,000 over here on the lending section. So the max borrow would typically be around $97,000. It just depends on the max utilization rate. But this is basically a different type of liquidity. You're providing liquidity in the lending section, and the borrowers are borrowing that capital. But this is not as liquid because you actually have to wait for the borrowers to pay back their money in order to withdraw the cash. So what I mean by that is basically say the borrowers took out $95K and they're just doing whatever with that. It's literally not in the platform at all anymore. It's literally in their wallet. So if you want to get your $100,000 out, well, guess what? You got to wait for this borrower to pay back the $95K. And basically this borrower is better rack up interest. So let's just say the rate is 15%. Well, this $95,000 is going to appreciate by 15% per year, basically. This is going to accumulate a lot of interest, and then the $100,000 is ultimately going to get a portion of that. So say on the $100,000, they're going to be getting 10% or so, because a portion of that interest is going to going to be going to the platform. Now, the actual rates will just depend on the actual platform. So this lender is going to constantly rack up more interest, which means that they're providing liquidity and getting real yield. And like we said, this is all considered liquidity as a service. And what's cool about this model is as the utilization rate increases, guess what? The APY for the people that are lending out is going to increase as well, which means that the borrow rate is also going to increase. So let's take a look at this model right here. It's a very exponential model, but over here, we're going to have the borrow rate. And then over here, we're going to have the utilization rate. We're just going to say BR and UR. So if this is 0% and over here, this is 100%, then guess what? As the utilization rate gets closer and closer to 100%, which means that this $95,000 gets closer and closer to 100K. So in periods of huge volatility, or say there's just a huge demand for borrowing capital, you can get really, really good lending rates over here. So similarly, over here on the liquidity pool model, we're providing concentrated liquidity or even full range liquidity. It's very, very similar. In periods of high volatility, there's high trading activity. So this means that you're going to end up getting high fees. So there's plenty of other models under liquidity as a service, but the premise is you're providing liquidity as your service and you're getting paid for doing so in things like rewards. Remember, it could also be through real yield or any other way you're getting paid. There's also other models out there in the regular financial world, but also in the software world, there's software as a service, otherwise known as SaaS. So software as a service is when you have a software that people want to use, and in order for them to use it, people need to pay monthly. So for example, on the software Metrics Finance, there's a pro plan which costs $40 a month or $400 a year. Well, that right there is going to be software as a service because they're providing a software and you pay a monthly fee and able to use it. And people are using that software for whatever reason they want to use it for. And in this scenario, Metrics Finance helps people make money through liquidity pools by identifying opportunities. And it can also simulate potential results and build out portfolios. People want that service, people want to use it, so in return they pay $40 a month or $400 a year. And in this case, a lot of the money that they make goes back into development costs because they really want to have the best service they can. And at the same time, the founder of the software has another company, which is an education as a service. So basically, they're teaching education, and the education is about how to build DeFi portfolios and basically the really advanced stuff about decentralized finance. And it also covers yield farming, liquidity mining, and much more. And in return, they're paying a flat fee to access this service basically. Now, my friend's education company that I'm helping him out with is called Builder Wealth, and they help people build out decentralized finance portfolios, and they utilize Jake's expertise and some of the other team members' expertise. So I'm sure you guys kind of get the concept of what I'm trying to go about here. You have all these different service-based models such as software as a service, education as a service. Well, there's also liquidity as a service, and it's strictly just providing liquidity as your service and getting paid out for doing that service. So it goes far beyond yield farming, and it goes far beyond liquidity mining, as well as all these other concepts that I spoke about. Now, here's a high-level overview on how you can find these liquidity as a service opportunities using the software called DeFi Llama. Before we get started though, I want to mention that my friend Jake is hosting a free workshop that basically goes over how to get started in DeFi and how to build up a passive income portfolio using things such as liquidity mining, as well as yield farming and liquidity as a service. I'll leave the RSVP link down in the description. It's going to be hosted on June 24th on a Monday. So if you click this little link right here, it's going to allow you to check the time of the event in your local time. The form is super quick and easy to fill out. It just asks for your name, email, and then a few questions. So that's going to be hosted in about 2 weeks from today, June 24th on a Monday. So let's go back to DeFi Llama and talk about how you can identify these different liquidity as a service opportunities. So first, we're going to go ahead and go to the yield section. And once we're on the yield section, the thing you're going to want to pay attention to is this attribute section. So first things first, we want to look at stuff that has a stable outlook because we want to look at stuff that is pretty stable when it comes to the returns. We don't want one day it to be doing super high, then the next day super low. I'm going to go over to this TVL section and put a minimum of $5 million just so we get some more blue chip stuff. You can refine this depending on how many opportunities you want to see, but I'm going to leave it because it's already tracking 503 pools, which is enough. So over here, I'm going to go to the chain section and hit clear all. And if you don't have over $25,000 to invest, don't select Ethereum, but I'm going to go ahead and select Ethereum, Solana, Arbitrum, as well as Polygon. Okay. Base is actually also good to include there, and you can include Optimism. So now we have 368 pools available. Over here, we can type in specific tokens or here specific projects, and you can even select different categories. And as you can see, there's lots and lots of different categories that we can go over. But in this scenario, I'm just going to leave them all checked off because a lot of these are already liquidity as a service. And this is because a lot of this is highly driven based on you providing your capital as liquidity. It's like the number one service you can do in decentralized finance. And then for project, I'm just going to select a couple projects that I believe in, so there's a lower chance of getting exploited. And then that way I don't have to look through a ton of projects that have lower TVL. So Uniswap v2 and Uniswap v3, as well as Velodrome. I'm also going to do Extra Finance, and then I'm going to do Aave. I'm going to do both v3 and v2. Then I'm going to do Compound v2 and v3, and then Morpho Compound. We're going to do Spark as well. We're going to do Pendle, and then we're going to do PancakeSwap, and I'm really just listing out the more blue chip platforms. I'm going to do Orca, and then I'm going to go ahead and do Camino Finance. And let's just do Lend and Liquidity. So as you can see, we just selected a ton of projects and we still have 162 pools to sort through. So this is already narrowing it down much more. Now we can go ahead and sort through our opportunities. And I'm going to say the ones with the higher TVL are going to have more consistent returns. And if you want to filter out low yield stuff, you can go ahead and filter it. So you're looking at things above a 10% APY. It really depends. Now we're just looking at 40 pools. And yeah, you're just going to have to go ahead and do some advanced due diligence to go ahead and see what exactly these opportunities are. And by using these different parameters, you're going to primarily just identify liquidity as a service opportunities. Then if you want to go further and check out stuff that is just liquidity mining, then you can go ahead and use Metrics Finance. This is my friend Jake's software, and there's a free version. About 85% of the features are free, so he doesn't care too much if you pay for it. I'm just putting this out there because it's a great tool. But essentially, you can identify different opportunities over here because you can look at different liquidity pools, and these are all concentrated liquidity pools, which I personally think is the easiest thing to get started in decentralized finance. And this is because you can get high yields like 50, 60, 70%, but these are on high yield assets. And this is because you can get high yield like 50, 60, 70%, but this is on blue chip assets, which means that this is super easy to manage blue chip asset liquidity pools. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and don't forget to check out this free workshop. Hopefully I taught you guys something new today, and have a good one.